Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our second Evoke Luncheon. This is a wonderful time for us to get together, to converse with each other, and to be inspired by each other and the wonderful stories and the wonderful lives of transformation that each of us leads. Evoke is an opportunity for each of us, each member of the Loyola community, to have those good things brought out from ourselves. Those graces, those talents, the points of generosity that are just waiting to be tapped in each one of us, to be evoked and to be put into service, the service of others. So thank you very much for putting Evoke on your schedule, for giving us an hour of your time again this month, and for engaging in that wonderful art of bringing out the best in others to be used in service.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rolando Martinez. I am the Graduate Assistant for the Office of the Vice President of Student Development, and I am a second semester graduate student in the Higher Education Student Affairs program. This semester, I've actually had the privilege of having Dr. Marian Claffey as my organization and governance professor. So as soon as I found out she was going to be speaking today, I immediately signed up, and I was even more pleased and surprised when they asked me to introduce her. Marian Allen Claffey is the Assistant Provost for Administration at Loyola and has been a member of the Provost's staff for nearly 8 years. She earned a BA degree in psychology from the former Mundelein College, and both an MED and a Ph.D. in higher education from Loyola University, Chicago. Dr. Claffey's dissertation research explored college student perceptions of justice and fairness generally, and how individual campus communities influence those perceptions specifically. An adjunct instructor in Loyola School of Education, Dr. Claffey teaches a graduate seminar on organization and governance of higher education. A seasoned administrator, Dr. Claffey has professional experience in a variety of areas, including admissions counseling, academic advising, and academic affairs administration. She has served as an assistant dean in Loyola's graduate school, an accreditation project manager for Loyola's 1995 comprehensive evaluation, and steering committee member for Loyola's 2005 comprehensive accreditation. As her students will attest, Dr. Claffey is a huge film buff, with a particular weakness for the horror genre. She and her husband Ed have been married for 27 wonderful years. They live in the Rogers Park area and can usually be found on the weekends attending at least one first run feature film. Their son, Tim, turns 21 in December. And it is with great honor and privilege to introduce to you Dr. Marian Allen Claffey.
Suited up here, and I have to turn off. Right here, turn that off. So I think you can hear me. If I talk up, you can hear me? Yeah? Okay. Thank you so much. The Gannon Center, Evoke, Janet, Dawn, Leanne, everybody who was involved in putting this together. And thank you so much, my colleagues and friends and students and strangers for taking time out to be here. It's really a humbling experience. I had hoped that Randy Gibbons would be here, but I understand that she's not. Randy's an employee at Loyola and she's a colleague of mine, and she and I had a conversation a few weeks ago that really helped me to sort of put this into a context. And we both had a chuckle that when you get to be a woman of a certain age and you're asked about your life story, you know, the question is not, do I have a story to tell? For me, the question was, which story? Which life? Which role? So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the fact that if I just get up here and I tell you about my accomplishments, that doesn't tell you what motivated me. You know, it doesn't tell you what challenged me. And as I think about the sort of arc of life that we're all traveling on, you know, what strikes me is the ebb and flow of it, the rhythm of it, the patterns that emerge, the sort of points of symmetry that we find on it. And it's those different points along that arc that make a story worth remembering or worth telling. And so what I wanted to do was, because I realized the story that I would tell about, you know, Marian at 25 would be very different from the story that I would tell of Marian at 55, was to give you sort of kind of abridged chapters of different points in my life, but to really, at the end, tell you a very specific story that I think has, I hope, particular meaning for the students who are here, because it was a story that happened when I was a rising senior in college, and it took me the first couple of years out of college, and it was really a pivotal experience for me. The story, though, that I would tell, you know, briefly, if I was telling you about Marian at 25, you would be hearing about a young woman not long out of college, not yet in graduate school, trying to position herself in the world, trying to make her way in the world, and really trying to make sense of a world that she was beginning to discover. Includes disappointment, includes pain and loss. I was recently divorced, which meant at 25 I had not been married for very long. I'm looking at some faces. You didn't know I had one of those, did you? I also was still recovering from the really brutally sudden loss of a loving father, and the loss of a parent at age 25 really shook me to my very core. So, you know, that was kind of Marian at that point at age 25. At age 55, it's a much different story. A mature woman, not a young woman, with advanced degrees to her credit. I think of myself as a seasoned, maybe well-seasoned administrator. You know, situated firmly in the world, you know, with a husband, a son, success. I'm happy. And I'm still trying to make sense, being on the sort of descending stage of the arc of life, still trying to make sense of a world that includes loss and pain. And when you experience it at this stage, it's a very, very different experience. Losing a parent again at age 55, being with my mother at her side in hospice care when she died, which was just about 15 months ago. Eulogizing a beloved older brother this summer in July. Losing a sibling, which was something I still can't begin to comprehend. I'm one of 7 children. I still can't begin to comprehend that. And in between 25 and 55 were a couple of points that I think are worth noting, because not only where I was in that arc that I'm talking about, but because I, at that stage, or those stages, kind of bookended together, made choices. I made decisions and assumed sacrifices because of a real profound calling that I felt that I was responding to. Made decisions about things that I believed were not just right for me, but were necessary. There was that sense of urgency about them. So at age 35, I had 10 years of administrative experience under my belt. I had a master's degree in tow. I was remarried. I was working full-time, and I was successful, and I was a new mother. I was a first-time mother. And I knew 2 months into a 6-month maternity leave that I wasn't going to go back to work. And that was an unbelievably difficult decision to make for all kinds of reasons. Not only the loss of identity, the loss of income. My husband is self-employed. We put pencil to paper and said, my God, are we even going to be able to afford this? But it had taken me 5 years to conceive. And I just felt that it was important to spend, for me, time with my family, with my husband, with my son. It's a decision that to this day I never regret, not only because of what it's meant to me personally, but because, ironically, of the professional opportunities that came my way as a result of that. A couple years later, when I let people know that I was ready to return to work, even if it was on a part-time basis, I had opportunities that opened up to me that I don't think would have been available if I had just kept on the path that I was traversing. And then a decade later, at age 45, again, back in the workforce, full-time. I was an associate dean. I was happy. My family was getting older. I felt this calling, really almost a sense of obligation to make a scholarly contribution to higher education, to the field that I've worked in my entire life, that's been so good to me, but to make a I felt an obligation to make a contribution, that I could make a contribution to higher education as a field of study. And so again, with the support of my family, but putting pencil to paper, Ed was still self-employed, is still self-employed. We just said, okay, can we do this? And I just said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it full-time. And I walked away from full-time work and went to graduate school, became a starving graduate student, living on a stipend for almost 4 years. Again, a decision that I will never regret, not only because of the benefits that came to me personally, but because of what it meant to me, to my family, and again, the professional opportunities that became available to me as the result of that. In between, I don't know if David Crumrine is here from chemistry. I saw him the other day, and we were talking about this, and he said, are you going to tell the accident story? And David, I haven't even thought about the accident story for years. I mean, so in between 35 and 45, the short version of that was pedestrian versus moving vehicle. Pedestrian. Hit and run driver. 6 months of my life that I wasn't able to get back because I spent it in, a full leg cast in the hospital, in a wheelchair, on crutches, in physical therapy. A hit and run driver that was never caught. That's a story that's better told over a couple of adult beverages, probably over at Hamilton's. That would probably better. But I figured, if that didn't scare me, I mean, if what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. If I survived that, a dissertation certainly wasn't going to discourage me. But anyway, those are sort of the high points along the way, or the kind of pivotal moments as I think of them along the way. But what I want to tell you, while all of you are still here and have time, is, as I said, this story that takes place when I was a senior in college, because I'm hoping that it's illuminating for you. I think there are lessons that I can impart to you. There were certainly things that I learned as a result of it. Indulge me. As a rising senior in college, I was a psychology major. I graduated with an undergraduate degree from Mundelein College. And somewhere between my junior and senior year, I decided that I wanted to go to graduate school. And I was a really good student. I was on my way to graduating with magna cum laude. I had departmental honors. I was the president of Psychi. I had done, a couple of years of volunteer service at a, day center for autistic children. I had done a semester-long research project with, supervised by the department chair, and I loved psychology, and I knew I wanted to go to graduate school. And of course, I wanted to become a clinical psychologist, which is the most competitive specialization within psychology that you can at least try for admission. But I had lots of encouragement from the department, from my chair, from the faculty, and people said to me, well, of course you'll be admitted. Of course you'll be admitted. Well, that's the first lesson, is be wary of other people's ambitions for you. That's lesson number one. I fault myself because one of the things I did not do was allow myself to be mobile. I was in love. And my boyfriend, who would later become my husband and then eventually my ex-husband, was a student at Northwestern, and he wasn't going to graduate school, but heaven forbid I should ask him to relocate anywhere. So I did not allow myself the flexibility of being mobile. And I limited myself to applying to maybe a half a dozen schools in the Chicago area. And the competitiveness I'm talking about is, let's say, 15 openings in a program and 400 or 500 applicants. It was very, very competitive. I was interviewed at a number of schools. That was very encouraging. I interviewed at Loyola, I've interviewed at UIC, I interviewed at DePaul. And then I waited while people kept saying, of course you'll be admitted. Of course you'll be admitted. And in April, the letters started arriving. As we like to say, not the fat envelopes, the thin envelopes. And they ranged from the elitist kind of, we're such a selective program, and you can't even part your hair straight. We're not even sure why you bothered applying. Thank you very much. To the, you need to know we very seriously considered your application, but, okay, anytime there's a but in a sentence, it means no, all right? Close but no cigar. I was admitted to Loyola's program as an alternate candidate, but there were 15 openings and there were 30 alternates. And I wasn't very high up the list. which meant, as far as I was concerned, I wasn't admitted anywhere. Nowhere. It was humiliating. It was devastating. It was demoralizing. And the second mistake that I made, which is another lesson to you, I had no plan B. I had not even, now we talk about students applying to safety schools. I wasn't even thinking in those terms. So I had no plan B, and I certainly wasn't about to put myself through the process of applying for admission to someplace in May for a fall admission. I had no plan B. I had not allowed myself to be mobile. I wasn't even thinking about master's programs in a related field. I had none of that. So that's the other lesson. Always, always have plan B. Always have plan B. The outcome was I graduated without a plan for graduate school, without admission to graduate school, and I was panicked because in my household, if you were living at home, you were doing one of two things. You were either working or you were going to school full-time. You were either working full-time or going to school full-time, or maybe going to school part-time and working part-time, but you were not sitting at home doing nothing, which meant, because I wasn't going to graduate school, I had to find a job. And for the next couple of years, I sort of moved from ill-suited job to ill-suited job, partly because, and this is another lesson coming up, because I had internalized what those letters had said to me. I believed that I wasn't graduate material. I figured I couldn't study my way out of a paper bag. I figured they were right. And I figured I was going to get what I deserved as a result of that, which might mean, you know, a crappy job. So that's the other thing is, don't believe what other people tell you, necessarily. So I went from, as I said, sort of ill-suited job to ill-suited job, and I was miserable. I was miserable. And I can remember one day in particular, riding home on the train. I was working at that point at the now defunct Arthur Anderson and Company. And I remember feeling trapped and suffocated and so unhappy and miserable. And probably sitting in that little car at the end with the walls around it doesn't help, but I was feeling trapped, and I remember thinking, I'm so unhappy, what am I gonna do? What can I do? You know, I had crappy jobs, but I had saved enough money to move out of home. I was living on my own. I wasn't living, you know, I was living pretty frugally, and I just thought, what am I gonna do? And I remember the proverbial light bulb went on over my head, and the light bulb said, "You can quit your job." And I remember thinking, okay, note to self, you know, coloring out light, you know, outside the lines is okay. And I remember thinking, you know, I should just quit doing this, and I really should start to figure things out. And I had this wonderful conversation with my mother, and I said to her, you know, I don't know what else to do, and I think I'm going to have to quit. And I don't want to quit because we're not supposed to quit. And she said, my mother could, as only a mother can. She said, honey, you don't have to drink the whole glass of milk to know it's sour. Which gave me permission. And I knew what she was saying, and what was implied was, if you need to do this, we'll support you until you figure out what you're going to do. So it gave me permission to quit that job. And then my mother said, and I could tell she wanted to sort of pull it back almost as soon as she said it. She said, honey, it's too bad you couldn't just be a student the rest of your life. And I know she sort of regretted saying it because it, you know, went back to graduate school and how that wasn't a happening thing, and, you know, but I said, no, Mom, I know what you're saying. And again, this kind of light bulb went on over my head. And I said, you know, I was never happier than when I was in college. I said, and it didn't matter what I was doing. It didn't matter whether I was in class, or I was writing a paper, or I was involved with a student organization, or I was delivering the mail over in the skyscraper building. I said, I don't think it's what I was doing. I think it's where I was doing it. And I said to myself, wow, maybe the next job I look for, maybe I should be thinking about working in a college, in an academic setting. That had never occurred to me before, ever. I'm not kidding. It had never occurred to me. So on my first day of liberation, of unemployment, I had quit on a Friday. It was a Monday. I hauled all my laundry to the laundromat, and I can remember standing at the folding table, and there was an Evanston Review on the table, which was, at the time, Evanston's weekly newspaper. And I flipped open the want ads, and I am not kidding you. I am not. There was a job there that said, under Help Wanted, Assistant to the Registrar at Kendall College. So I took down the phone number, I took the information, finished my laundry, went home and I called. I got an appointment for an interview. I went in for the interview, and I was hired on the spot. And the rest, as they like to say, is HERstory.
I know some of you have to leave, but I do want to just open it up to anyone that might have a lingering question for Marian. And I think I'm going to have to steal that line on a number of occasions.
Which
with, and the rest they shall say. So, any questions for Marian?
Yes.
The two examples, or the two stories that you told us in age 35 and age 45, as I heard them, involved taking a big risk.
A huge leap of faith.
And
huge
I'm
leap of
wondering
faith.
if you had other experiences where you were met with maybe the urge to take a risk and you didn't, or how you discerned which ones to take and which ones not to take.
Well, actually, since I didn't reveal the entire story of my life, I had actually done something similar when I was right before I started my master's degree, which was I had been working full-time, and when I decided I wanted to go to graduate school, I sort of am an all-or-nothing kind of person, and I knew that if I was going to do it, I really wanted to immerse myself in it, and I did the same kind of thing. I just sort of said, okay, I'm going to take out student loans, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get this done as quickly as I can, and it is a leap of faith in the sense that you are hopeful that things will work out. But there's a lot to be said for being also very pragmatic and analytic about it. And as I said, kind of putting pencil to paper and sort of saying, is this a feasible thing to do? But if it's something you really want to do, you're going to make it. You're going to make it work. So those, I think for me, the huge leaps of faith have come, whether it's been related to my own education, and to my family. So those are the things that have been really important to me.
I wonder if you comment a little more on that lack of mobility. I thought that was interesting because I see it here among women, especially in my own field.
It was stupid. It really narrowed the field for me. It really limited my choices. And I was looking at programs in this metropolitan area, which is just so competitive and is such a draw for so many people, rather than saying, I could look at a smaller institution, maybe in kind of more of a rural area. I mean, I'm just going to keep doing it until I get admitted. But I like I said, I think I was sort of blinded by an idealized sense of the relationship that I was in at the time also. And it wasn't a very smart decision.
And also applies to career opportunities.
And applies
as
to
well.
career opportunities as well, sure. Yeah. Thanks, Marian.
Can you talk
Kelly.
about the allowance that your mother gave you in supporting your moves and how that made a difference in decisions you made?
When my parents were always, neither of my parents graduated from college. And they were a pink collar and a blue collar worker. And sort of the ethic in our home was, what's ironic is that, education was important and it was valued, but it wasn't valued any more than, hard work, honesty, fairness, pulling your own weight, so that was just as important. And I think my mother in particular, but my father also, had seen how hard I had worked in school. I'd gone through school on scholarships. I was a work-study student all 4 years. How hard I had worked in school, and how hard I had tried to support myself, and how hard I was trying to do the right thing, and it just wasn't working out. And for my mother to say that great, I love that quote, honey, you don't have to, drink the whole glass of milk to know it's sour, was her way of saying, I believe you, it's bad. If you think it's bad, I believe you that it's bad, and you don't have to, no medals for bravery. You don't have to keep doing this just to prove something. And if you need to make a change, we're behind you. Well, like I said, that was huge because it meant moral support, financial support, whatever. I wasn't unemployed for more than maybe a couple of weeks from the time I quit that job till the time I got my next job. But knowing that I had that safety net, and that I had their support, and that I had their, as I said, sort of permission to take this risk was huge. And I don't think that we realize how much it means to our friends and colleagues when they're trying to make decisions like this and they're struggling with whether or not they should make a sacrifice or make an important decision, or when we're there to support them and to say, yes, you should, yes, it's okay. I mean, we're giving them permission to take risks. Yeah, I miss my mother. Yes, Jane.
I really don't have a question, but I have a comment. I remember running into my name's Jane.
Jane who?
Running into Marian in Target after she had quit the second time, and I was thinking I was kind of sad for Loyola because you weren't going to be working here. And I was glad to know you were going to be going to school here, and I'm very glad that you're back at the university. I did walk away though. She's crazy. I can't believe she was quit. But I just want to say thank you for telling your story and being a good role model and a mentor and a good friend. And it's so great to have you in the world.
Oh, Jane, thank you so much. Thank you. And it was hard. Let me tell you, it was hard walking away. Walking away at 35, I did not realize how much how much my professional how much I was going to mourn the loss of my professional identity. Even though, as I said, that time I spent at home with my son was, we just love him so much. I love him so much. It hurts, and we have an incredibly close relationship. But I did not. Part of that loss was not just the loss of income and prestige and status, but my professional identity. That was really, that's hard. That was hard to do. And you saw I didn't stay out for real long. I didn't stay out for too long.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm going to just.
Thank you, Marian. You were talking about taking risks. I thought, it's a risk to be one of the first speakers in a Telling HERstory series. And I also think it's a risk to share things like divorce and grief and loss and rejection and failure and success, particularly in the context of work and with colleagues. And I just so appreciate you sharing that and then sharing the wisdom that came with it. We're a better community because of your story and because of you being here. So thank you for that. I want to thank a few people for helping this get off the ground. You know, Janet Sisler was so kind to just mention Evoke, but her and Carol Coyne's partnership in this was critical to just reaching many of you. So thank you to Janet and to Carol and to the Gannon Center for your support and collaboration. And then as always, I want to thank Michael McEwen Jr., the program coordinator of Evoke, who's often behind the scenes making it happen, along with Leanne, Ms. Leanne Tromanix, our Evoke GA. Leanne and I had a conversation on the way over here whether people are called Ms. or Miss. And she says, yeah, I don't really care, you know, what you call me. And I said, you will when you get older. I want to also, you know, again, thank you all for being here. One of the goals really was that we could come together, and it's so important to be in one another's company. And the delay in lunch and the tablecloths just gave us a chance to enjoy one another all that more. And I just want to say that your presence here means a lot. It makes a difference. It would feel different if you weren't here. And so we hope that you'll continue to join us throughout the year. And if we continue to grow at this rate, we'll be holding it in Gentile. We appreciate your patience and the time it takes to see people in a crowded space, but we felt like symbolically it was important to be held in Piper Hall. And we hope to continue to do that and try to make it work as smoothly as possible. Just a couple of announcements of things that we have to come that you're all invited to. Well, first, that we've been videotaping the speakers for many of our events, and the video from Marian's talk will be posted on our website within the coming weeks. And our November Telling HERstory is featuring Dr. Susan Ross, professor in the theology department. And we're working out a date. We had a conflict with the President's Leadership Retreat, so we're having to change that date. But please stay tuned. I think we have all of your contact information. If you didn't sign in, if you didn't have a name tag, if you could sign in, that way we can make sure that you'll be notified of the new date. And once again, we're having a women's retreat for undergraduates, graduate students, faculty, staff, and alumni of Mundelein and Loyola. And that's going to be taking place February 4th and 5th. We'll be doing an online registration process that hasn't happened yet. But when it does, you'll want to sign up early because there seems to have been a lot of interest. We'll notify you about that. And then finally, we have the next Evokes This, I Believe panel series happening on November 17th at 12:30 in Simpson Multipurpose Room. And for those of you who don't know, this is a chance, again, to hear from faculty, staff, and students, and even alumni of Loyola to share their philosophy on life, what it is that grounds them and that they hold to be most true. And they've been quite moving. If you haven't had the chance to go to one, I really recommend it. And all of that is on our website, but just so you know, the speakers for those will be Rabia Khan, who is Assistant Director of First Year Halls, Dr. John Hart, who's Assistant Professor at the Medical School and Assistant to the President for Mission and Identity, Kimberly Moore, Director of Student Activities and Greek Affairs, Father Mark Bosco, Assistant Professor of English and Theology, and then Susan Nugent, an undergraduate in the class of 2012. Thanks again for being here, and I hope to see you next month.